Welcome back to Drop the Act, brought to you by Performing Perfectly. I'm Chris Key, and today I'm joined by someone who has flown closer, faster, and with more precision than any of us can imagine. I'm joined by Daniel Lowe's former pilot for the Red Arrows, where communication has to be flawless, leadership is earned in the air, and performance is non-negotiable. Strap yourselves in. This one's going to be fast, focused, and full of insight. What time is it? 11 o'clock. Doesn't matter, really. I was just going to say a good morning or an afternoon. Anyway, morning, Dan. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you. It's a real pleasure. Thank you for inviting me in.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's great. It's great to see you. We're trying to get as many people from all aspects of business, industry, and sport, whatever it might be, to come on the Drop the Act podcast and just talk about how effective communication works in their profession. And because we met quite a few years ago, you suddenly sprung to mind, and I thought, goodness me, this might be quite interesting because you obviously have a varied career in aviation, but part of that was flying with Red Arrows. So with a lot of businesses, they talk about, the why, understanding the why, and then you can take it from there. So I'm just going to start with that question. Why? Why did you want to fly at speeds of over 400 miles an hour, within close proximity to other planes? Where did it start? Take me on that journey.
Yeah, first off, I think, well, why not? But yeah,
of course.
I was lucky. I grew up in an aviation family. So my dad was a pilot, and he was an airline pilot, and he flew for an airline called Cathay Pacific. Other airlines are available, but I grew up in Hong Kong, and you've probably seen, and I'm maybe even flown in, but there used to be that old airport called Kai Tak where they used to come in over the buildings and turn at the last moment. And my school was pretty much right next to where they used to turn. So, from the classrooms, I used to watch these aircraft almost turn around our school building and land down. You could smell the aviation fuel. You were surrounded by, my friends' dads were pilots. I remember lying in bed at night, and dad had a bit of an outdoor bar there because that's in the garden, and his mates just come around and play darts, and you could hear them talking about, what they used to do in the Air Force before they became airline pilots. So I didn't really have much of a grasp of what the UK was. I went back on summer holidays, but I didn't really get it. And when we did go back, it was this faraway land where extended family lived. But we go back, and during the summer months, we go to air shows, and you used to see these jets and these airplanes fly around, and it kind of just meant that when I went back, I just had these memories and these dreams of what that was. And so I wasn't really exposed to it much, but as a little boy growing up, I was surrounded by pilots. I was surrounded by these amazing stories. And once a year, I got to see a Royal Air Force fighter jet fly at an air show when we go back and see family. So it was quite a romantic thing for me. And it was something that, these guys became my heroes. And so that dream became, how do I become one of these people? That was it, really. But it just entered my psyche.
And how do you become one of those people? It's one of those professions that I've never thought, God, yeah, actually, where'd you start?
Yeah, there's a lot of luck. There's a lot of luck, as there are in most things, but the preparedness and luck. So I just started to believe genuinely. And sometimes I curse myself that I didn't believe I'd become a Premiership footballer, because life would be a lot easier now. But I just started to believe at 7, 8 years old, that's what I was going to be. And I used to tell my friends at school, and then it got to the time of school where you got a time of your life where you got to choose your GCSE subjects and your A-level subjects, and are you or aren't you going to go to university? And much to the frustration of my mum, and I'm sure to the love of my dad, it was all about, how do I get into a cockpit at the earliest opportunity? What subjects got me there, and what do they need? And that's how I live my life. And even now I meet people at reunions, and they say, did you become a pilot? And I tell them, and they say, well, must have never been in doubt, because there was just something burning inside me that it's what I wanted to do. So yeah, it's a difficult thing to get into, to come on to your second question. To come off the street, should we say, and become a pilot, it's going to set you back easily £100,000. So it's not something most people can easily just become. It's a huge investment, not only financially, but time, effort. 100 grand and 18 months of studying, flying, turning up, being prepared all the time. It's a big sacrifice, and I have the utmost respect for people who have come through that background, because it's not easy, and it's a huge gamble, because you could be £100,000 down and still not land a job. No pun intended, by the way, but still not get a job. But so it's a huge commitment. I have ultimate respect for those people. I went a separate route. So because of the military background, I guess, of my dad's friends who had become airline pilots off the back of being RAF or Australian or Canadian Air Force or Navy pilots, I'd kind of had that those stories of daring do happen in the background. They're what I call the romantic stories of, challenges, of fear, of intrepidation, these kind of emotions that you dreamt that these guys must have felt with as you're a child. I wanted to go and experience. So that's why I was quite set on joining the Royal Air Force as a pilot. Not only that, there's those amazing stories, aren't there, of the Battle of Britain and the Bomber Command boys and girls who it was the ultimate sacrifice really for their country. And even that was like a mark of honor that I didn't even understand as a child, but that must be something incredible if the country still talks about it every year.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be counted. I wanted to be, I wanted to be alongside the legacy of those people, maybe have a legacy of my own. So although the words I'm using now probably aren't what 11-year-old will tell you, that's probably those kind of emotions that were kind of being dreamt up at the time. So for me, it was the Air Force. And so at 18, I was accepted into the Air Force. So you just apply. I went down a careers office. At the time, it wasn't the most popular thing. It was during the Second Gulf War, and I remember I went to the careers office on the Strand in London, and it was covered in paint from the protests about conflict. It's not a nice thing, and obviously it generates a lot of emotion, as it should. And so I remember that being quite intimidating at 17, 18, walking into that. But the process was, I got some information. I went away for a selection process up at RAF Cranwell, which is where they conduct their officer training in Lincolnshire. Off the back of that, although the first time I wasn't successful, a year later I became an officer in the Air Force at 19, and was then put into RAF flying training. And then that was my journey. The thing was, I didn't have to pay £100,000, but I did join the Air Force for 16 years.
And so I was going to ask, because you'd mentioned about the financial. So when you went to the Air Force, had you flown before then? Had you done anything at all? That was your first. So you went through your whole training with the RAF.
That was it, yeah. And I'd sat on airplanes and watched my dad fly. I've got one of the pictures I cherish the most is I must have been about 2. I'm sat on my dad's lap and he's in his uniform flying a 747 at night somewhere, when the old days where you're allowed in the flight deck. So I kind of been surrounded by it, but had I actually sat at the controls and flown an airplane? No. So I never forget it. It was a guy with Clads, we call him. Clarenbold was my first ever flying instructor. You never forget those names like that. I'll never forget where it was. It was a base in just outside of Huntingdon called RAF Whitton in Cambridgeshire. And it was a little airplane called the Grob, which is kind of what you'd see on the weekend, like a little single engine piston propellered airplane. And I remember running down the runway, taking off and thinking, oh my God, I'm here. And then just over analyzing it rather than taking it in. It's like, oh, do I actually want to be here? Do I like this? That kind of thing. I think, yeah, of course you do. You're meant to be here. And I remember real conflict. And then 5 minutes later, you just absolutely, the joy of flight. Have you flown yourself?
No, I haven't.
It's difficult to just one lesson. Maybe it doesn't go because there's so much going on. But there is something that we all have in our profession, I'm sure, but there is just something about flying. There is no other feeling like it. It's pure freedom.
I mean, I know it sounds like an obvious thing to say because, we many of us learn to drive, and the first time behind a wheel, you're very aware that you're in a bit of metal that can go up to 70. Well, it can go more than 70, but should only go up to 70 miles an hour. And that there's danger involved in that. But of course, the first time you fly a plane, and you're not only are you in that metal, you're going at much higher speeds, and you're also thousands of feet off the ground. I mean, how do you mentally prepare yourself for that? How are you taught for that?
Yeah, I guess there's a level of fear, but the fear isn't so much the flying. The fear is failing, because it's quite a competitive thing, because when you join, I joined because I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And when you first go into into flying training, everyone who's finished officer training to become a pilot is on the same course. And from that, you have 6 months over a set syllabus to display a bunch of different skills, but it's to display how quickly you can be taught, how quickly you pick up a skill, capacity, situational awareness, effective communication, as we're talking about, that kind of stuff. All these skills build into a thing that's called airmanship. And airmanship builds around what a pilot becomes. It's the thinking pilot. A Formula One racer is not only a good racing driver, they're probably thinking 20, 30 laps ahead of where the car is. What's happening to the weather? What's happening to my tires? What setting are we on? That's drivership, if there's a comparison. It's the bigger picture. So they're looking at the development of the pilot within that, and we all learn at different rates. And the bottom line is, unfortunately, in only those short 6 months of learning to fly your first ever aircraft, you're constantly assessed, constantly scored, and the higher scores go off to fighter pilot training because it requires maybe a higher level of skill. And that's not taking away from the transport aircraft and the helicopter pilots who do incredible jobs. You know, the helicopter guys are going in at night on special forces missions. There's transport pilots who are dropping life-saving aid in northern regions of Pakistan after earthquakes. All these pilots are incredibly skilled, but in that short 6 months, you have to fit somewhere in the bill. So there's an element of competition. So just feed that back into what I was saying about there's that element of fear of, oh, I don't want to fail. I want to, there's that competitiveness. There's all the rest of it. But in terms of the speeds and what you're doing, it is incremental. You start off just, it sounds so noddy now, but you're getting taught like just how to taxi. Yeah. Just very much like when you first get in a car. Now you jump in a manual car and you do it without thinking. You're probably more engaged in what radio station you're putting on. Whereas before we used to be staring at the rev counter at a red light going, please don't stall, please don't stall, please don't stall. Yeah. Same thing. And so you just taught to taxi the airplane. How do you even get to the runway? Then you're taught to take off. Then you're taught to circle back and land. And then over the next few months, you're taught how to do aerobatics. You're taught how to do formation. You're taught how to do low level. You're taught how. And so everything comes at an incremental stage. So by the end of 5.5 years of training, those aircraft do 20 miles every minute. You're doing 1,300 miles an hour. And sometimes you're doing that as low as 250 feet off the ground, where you're probably about 600, 700 miles off when you're that low. So it goes from actually high level going fast is hard, and all of a sudden really low going fast is even harder because your horizons are a lot closer and you've got obstacles to avoid. So it's all very incremental, and albeit it's testing and it's challenging, it's just one stage at a time. It's not stalling at the traffic light to being able to do a hill start, and you just don't do it all on the same day, and it builds as you go.
So you got into the RAF, you became a fighter pilot. Where did you serve? What was your role? I mean, I'm sort of really interested in the mindset of that, about how not just flying the plane, but then the tasks that you're asked to do.
Yeah, well, not to age me, and I like to give a background to every answer, as you're probably picking up. Not to age me, I'm 40 in a month.
You're looking very good on it.
Thank you very much. I'm living in a flat in southwest London, and I moved in here Easter weekend, which was just a couple of days ago, 7 years ago. And at the age of 39, 40, it's the longest I've ever lived anywhere in the UK at 7 years. So kind of gives you an idea of how much you're expected, or how turbulent your life can be in the military, albeit incredibly rewarding. So each one of those courses I mentioned was 6 to 18 months, depending on what aircraft type and what you were doing. And that was in about 4 or 5 different locations around the country. I went to my first ever operational squadron, which was flying the Eurofighter, the Typhoon. That was based in Lincolnshire, in a place called RAF Coningsby, just near Woodall Spa. Then I took a tour up. We moved up to Lucas, which is essentially St Andrews in the Kingdom of Fife in Scotland, one of the most beautiful places I've ever lived. Back down there, and then joined the Red Arrows in Scampton in Lincolnshire. And then with that, we moved around. I moved back down to London, and I've moved since. So in terms of geographically around the country, it's been everywhere. In terms of flying the aircraft, we did tours of the Falkland Islands. We've still got jets down there. I've been out to the Middle East a handful of times, albeit not on a kinetic, as we would call it, operation, but there was big exercises out in Abu Dhabi. There was big exercises out in Oman. We had huge exercises out in Malaysia, flown all around the United States, around the Caribbean. The thing about the Air Force, or about the military life in general, and even bigger than that, aviation, is that you get to see the world, and you get to go to some amazing places and do some incredible things with some of the most impressive people that I've ever been lucky enough to surround myself with. And that's been the greatest thing. And on these exercises, you're constantly pushed. You turn up, and some of these exercises are, I guess other fighter pilots listening to this might cringe, might say, yeah, fair enough, I don't know, but they're kind of like turning up to mini World Cups without glamorizing it, because none of it is to be glamorized. It's just you turn up as a unit. You're the Royal Air Force, you're representing the UK, and you go to high-end exercises where there's, the missions are complex, and you're having to fit into a huge picture of multinational formations, I guess is the best way to put it, but multinational missions where there's cultural differences, there's language barriers, there's mindset differences. The way in which the Americans operate is very different to the way we operate, yet there's that huge pressure of the special relationship, isn't there? So how do you fit in with them? Because there might be an occasion yet again, unfortunately, where we have to work closely together to get a job done. So that's where it kind of took me. And I did 16 and a half years, and it felt like I was in there 2 minutes. It went in a heartbeat.
I mean, we could talk so much about everything. I'm just going to read a quote that I found because what I wanted, obviously, want to get to the crux of a lot of the areas we cover with performing perfectly, but also see how the world of aviation, Red Arrows in particular, can help and be connected to other businesses. So I find this quote. I'm not sure whose it is, and it could be you for all I know. In the Red Arrows, we don't aim for perfection. We aim for consistency under pressure. Communication isn't optional. It's the difference between success and catastrophe.
I wish that was my quote. It's great. Yeah.
And I just thought, that really summed it up for me. That idea that I mean, how do you go about? I mean, this is such a big question, I suppose, but how do you go about learning the most effective way to communicate when you're at speeds that you are, when the risk is so high, when one single error in the way you communicate to another pilot may cause catastrophe?
Yeah, and catastrophe is unfortunately life and death. Which, when you think you're just there for an air show, really. Why is the risk worth taking? But that's because that places everything. And communication. Well, I say the one big thing that binds that whole team is trust. But that comes from the fact that you have grown together, and you know the other person has either got your back, or the other person has worked incredibly hard to make themselves the best version of themselves, totally for the output of the team. And the big thing within that is communication. And just to kind of break it down, hopefully for the listener, when you did tactical flying, so everyone in the Red Arrows, all the pilots in the Red Arrows have been and are current serving RAF fighter pilots, and you have to have been a fighter pilot. Now, a lot of what you do on the front line is get in quietly, do your job, get out quietly, unseen, unheard, if you can. Perfect. And so with that, a lot of stuff we do is pre-planned at a certain time, or it's hand signals. We fly close enough that actually we put hand signals instead of talking on the radio, because if you're going to put something out there, it can be intercepted. So, if you're trying to stay silent. So a lot of the stuff you're used to is through visual communication as opposed to verbal. And then when you go to the Red Arrows, it is purely verbal communication. And if you've ever listened to a show, it might sound funny to a lot of people. There's a lot of shouting, there's a lot of high pitch, almost squealing, but it's not. That's messages to each other. Like, I mean, the whole thing is done off communication. Like Red One is out the front, he'll be saying like, and pulling up to start a show. Now that is, even that cadence of up is the rate of which all those other pilots are pulling back on their control columns to make sure that they're all going in a vertical plane in unison. And that is all done off the tone of the leader's voice. If he came in and said, and pulling up, obviously it's a lot quicker. Maybe he's under rush. Maybe there's some cloud in the way, and everyone's like, oh, I need to be on this. And you won't just blindly put in the same movement. You're listening to the tone and the attenuation of a leader's voice. Then when it comes, hopefully you've seen a show and listeners have, but if there's international listeners here who might not know who the Red Arrows are, the UK's Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team, they do these formatted choreographed displays with jets. They move in unison. And whereas a lot of teams have different aspects, some American teams, some European teams, they might be a lot closer and tighter in their formation position. They might disappear out of sight, get them change shape and come back. Whereas one of our fortes was that we could do that in front of your eye. We will change symmetrically at hundreds of miles an hour into a different shape right in front of you, and it would look perfectly timed. It would look, as I say, in unison. And we're displaying teamwork, we're displaying loyalty, we're displaying precision, all these kind of things. But that all comes through effective communication, because the call has been made to change position. Each person has acknowledged what they're about to do, and then they all move back at the same time. And every single moment of that is done by talking to each other.
I mean, you're sort of describing a metaphor for business there, aren't you? Really, to find precision, so, yeah. To find work together, communication's the first.
That's the idea. Like the Air Force is, like most of the military, is just a level up from Cub Scouts. So we all love a badge, don't we? We all like when you've achieved the standard, we get to put another badge or badge onto our sleeve of our uniform. But with us, it was squadron crests, and they always used to be on your left shoulder. And our squadron saying was eclat, and eclat is either brilliance or excellence. And the whole point of that is that we were unrelenting in our pursuit of excellence. But the reason we chose excellence, or the team chose excellence as it's saying is that it's very rarely, if ever, achieved. So you're constantly chasing excellence, very rarely achieved. But we went out every day to be excellent. And what the show is there to do, we talked about a moment before, the it could go horribly wrong, and unfortunately, people have lost their life doing it. And so the question would be, what it's an issue, but it's bigger than that. It's bigger than that, because what we're showing you is we don't want people to come to air shows and go, I want to be a fighter pilot. It'd be great if they did. We don't even want people to come to a show and go, I'm going to join the Royal Air Force. Again, would be great if we did. Huge PR tool, even for the armed forces, even for the United Kingdom when you display abroad. What we're trying to show is that the United Kingdom, the armed forces, the Royal Air Force, and within that fighter pilot, all these different sections are very good at what they do. They communicate well. They're loyal. What they do is precise. They're the best in the world at what they do, and they do it with the tools that they're given at the time, and they get a world-class job done. And when you watch that show, they're the messages that are coming across. That's what we want you to see. But we don't want you then to be like, oh, I have to be a fighter pilot. I have to join the armed forces. I have to work with the UK. What we want you to do is watch that show and be inspired to be the best in whatever you want to do. And you can get as micro as day-to-day life. But if you want to go and run a fish and chip shop, be the best fish and chip shop in the UK. If you want to go and be a brain surgeon, go and be the best brain surgeon in the world. You go and own it and smash it and be the best. But it's done off these core principles of loyalty, teamwork, communication, all these things we're already talking about. And that's what we're trying to get across, that yes, we do this in this capacity, but just please be inspired by what we did, because you could be better at what you want to do than we are at what we're doing over here.
Let's go back to the sort of the detail of that. So you've touched on a few things there. I mean, one thing I was just fascinated to think about then was body language. We always talk about the fact that it's the non-verbal clues that give us away immediately. That's Absolutely. What we read off people. And you are there. I mean, for me, it's like winding down the window and then just looking at the car next to me and, giving them away. But you're flying at whatever speed. And actually, it's about body language, looking to the person next to them. And, what sort of detail do you go into the training on the ground with both, with the body language, with those signals, and then with the communication? How is that structured to make sure this detail that has to go in to make sure you can be the best versions of yourself and that you can be as safe as possible?
Yeah, 100%. We do a lot. I mean, just quickly, how powerful is a thumbs up when you look up in a stressful moment at a mate, whether it be, for you, in a theatre or during a practice building up to a big show and the pressure's on, or a sports person or someone in business and you're about to land a pitch. How powerful it is if you just look up across the room and your mate doesn't say anything, they just give you a thumbs up.
Yeah.
How powerful is that? Huge. We're talking a thumbs up. And I think it's 70% of communication between humans is nonverbal. We just pick up, you know what it's like when your partner or your best mate or your work colleagues having an off day and they haven't said anything yet. How many times do you ask someone, are you okay? Because it doesn't feel right, and that's incredibly powerful. Now, just take that for a second with what we are now in the commercial world. I sit next to the pilot I fly with now, so I can pick up on a lot of that. Whereas when you're in a fighter aircraft, you can't see someone's body language because you're in a different airplane. Oh, but I've been in a brief. I've had a chat with them before the show, but when we're displaying, or when you're in a fighter jet going off to do a job, you're in your own environment. You can't look each other in the eyes. You've got your helmet on, your visor on, but just a thumbs up, yeah, everything's good. Or I'm waving my hand as if to like wave someone away means go into a relaxed formation position. Or we would even sit down and we'd learn, if I flash my wings twice, it means turn right this many degrees. If I turn towards you and I keep turning towards you more than 3 seconds, you turn through this many degrees. We would sit down and we would plan all this stuff, intimately. We do a thing called chair flying, which I'm sure people do in different aspects of what they do, but chair flying would be sitting down in a crew room in our squadron, or even in the evening back in when you go through flying training, you live you live on the base in like a barrack block or an officer's mess. You'd go and sit in your chair and you shut your eyes and you place your hands as if they're on the throttle and the control. I mean, shut my eyes now, talk to you about it, and you go, right, if I say this, what are you going to do? If you see this hand signal, what are you going to do? And you sit there for hours and hours and hours and hours, because when it doesn't always go to scripts. There's the two favorite sayings is that Tyson said, you only have a plan till you get punched in the face. And we had one in the military that, a good plan never survives first contact with the enemy, meaning that it's all, it's going to go loose when stuff really goes, when it starts heading south. And so it's really important to understand in these moments, how are we going to get each other? How are we going to communicate? Because communication is, most biggest failures in the world have come through a lack of communication or an assumption of the wrong message. And we say effective communication is understanding the message that was passed. That is effective communication. Is it? Do the people that you're passing the message to understand what you meant? And so it's hours and hours of just sitting there and saying, right, if this scenario, we call it pictures. If we see this picture, how are we going to react? If we see this picture, how are we going to react? What are you going to say? What's your call? What's this? And just to move that onto the Reds, as I mentioned, every show we did, we'd sit in a briefing room for 20 minutes before, and the boss would run through the show, and the boss being Red One, sorry. And he would just make all his calls. He'd go, and pulling up, smoke on, go. And then he'd call the move, and it'd be like 2, 3, 4, 5, being as he calls it, the different team members would call their number, which is what we do in the air to acknowledge that we've heard it and now we're going to action a move. And then the boss would be like, and coming left now, a little bit like holding. And everything he's doing is as he's flying a show and he's talking through how he's flying the show, how he will talk in the air, a bit quicker than obviously we're not going to sit there for 22 minutes to go through every second of it. We could do it in 5-6 minutes. But the point is that in itself, that communication piece has put people in the moment. They can visualize where they're going to be. They're going to visualize how they're going to communicate back. And that communication is going to have an effect that they're going to have to execute, and they're going to do it. And that's how we build up to being, a high performing, tight knit team, and tight knit, just not personality in terms of people and trust, but in terms of being able to put 9 jets, 6-7 feet from each other's wing upside down over any location in the world that you want them to display at.
I mean, it's quite obvious when you say it. I go, well, of course you rehearse, just like I do with actors before a performance. We're in a rehearsal room. We're working it out. We're working exactly how it's going to be. And I've never really thought about the Red Arrow sat in chairs in a room doing exactly that. But it makes perfect sense. And I wonder how many businesses could take that on and go, how many times do we really prepare? How many do we really think about what we're about to do, what we're about to pitch, what we're about to deliver? These important, critical moments for a business. How much preparation and rehearsal goes into the final performance?
Yeah, and you're someone who deals in final performances. You're very, you're used to it. I'm sure it would be part and parcel of, you would never put performance. Well, I say that, I don't know.
No, you're right.
Class, but you're going to build up to, aren't you? There is going to be that level of preparedness and practice. That's what it is. It's a rehearsal, and that's coming from someone who lives in the world of rehearsing. The Red Arrow is a rehearse. That's fair enough. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and I think a lot of people probably watch the Red Arrow. It's just what they do.
I mean, just to be clear, I didn't think they just went into the sky and
no.
I hadn't imagined you all sat in the chairs in the room. But
every day, we will not do a display. The Red Arrows will not display having not done some type of brief rehearsal beforehand. Every show, and we're talking, they fly 3 times a day, 5 days a week in the 7 months of their training calendar, and then they display between 70 and 85. They've got 70 to 85 fixtures, if you want to call it that, in 4 months between end of May, start of June, right through to September, October. So they execute their skill 15 times a week minimum, but they still rehearse. Even 3 times a day, they'll rehearse 3 times a day because they rehearse before they go up there. And just leading into what you're saying, exactly, it's like, people probably just look at someone like the Reds and go, oh, that's just what they do. It's like, that is exactly what they do. They perform because they've rehearsed, and they rehearse over and over. And even though they've seen it before, they've done it before, it's the 12th time they've done it this week, they're still rehearsing because that's how they're going to get that high-end performance. And you're right. How many businesses go, yeah, we used to rehearse because that's when we learned it, but we're all right now. We're up and running. We know what we're doing. Well, yeah, so do those guys, but they do it at a world-class level, and they rehearse every day.
And once you're a member of the Red Arrows, is that solely your job, or people still fighter pilots and taken into other areas as well?
Yeah, it's seen as a tour, like an operational tour. So all the guys will have been on fighter squadrons, and then whether that be a frontline squadron, some might have come from like a jet training squadron. They've been on the front line, but then they've gone back to be fighter pilot instructors, if you like, back in the training system. But then, you get sent to the Red Arrows. It's a dedicated space. It's a dedicated 3 to 4 years. And then after that, once you finish that, you go back to being, you go back to your next unit, which will be a fighter squadron. So there's guys in the Air Force now who are frontline fighter pilots who have had 3 years or 4 years being a Red Arrows pilot. Now they're back to doing operational duties.
And as you touched on, we're talking about communication in businesses and preparation and rehearsing and a mistake in business. I mean, I was with someone the other day who was talking about actually you get a decision wrong and it affects everyone in your company possibly, and then you think about their partners, and then you think about their children, and financially actually there can be a ripple down through a business. If you get something wrong though, as you said, it is life or death. And there have been, as you said, very sadly, some moments where there have been accidents. And I just wondered,
Yeah.
not that I want you to talk about a specific, moment that we're very much aware of, but have you been involved in a situation where communication hasn't been spot on and there has been risk or danger or, mistakes made as a result?
Yeah, it has, and in fact, the biggest one was actually not actually in the Red Arrows. It was right, to glam it up. We would know it as Top Gun, but yeah, it's not really how we are in the UK. We're
I've
much
never
more.
I've never seen Top Gun.
Oh, okay. Well,
I
don't
know
worry
everyone
about
always says to me,
it.
"You've
Don't
never
worry
seen
about it.
Top Gun." And I'm going,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'm sorry, I've never seen it." But anyway, I know what it's about.
I'd give it a skip, mate, if I was you. But there's the whole idea about the film behind the film Top Gun is following what the U.S. Navy do have, and what they have is a school called Top Gun, which grabs the highest performing fighter pilots from all their operational squadrons, and it puts them through a course of about 2 months, which tests them to the highest degree. They go against adversaries that they've probably never been tested before. They're pushed to higher limits. They lead more difficult missions. Things just become harder and faster. And at the end of it, you graduate. You go back as a Top Gun graduate, which means that you are an instructor in all the different disciplines that a fighter aircraft is to do. But you're also there to teach not only the new pilots coming through, but you're the bearer of standards. You're the mark of what top performing fighter pilot should be, but you're also there to support the bosses of these squadrons, despite maybe being of a lower rank, and even maybe teach them or do their check rides, all that kind of stuff. Now, we do have that in the UK and in the Royal Air Force. We call it the Qualified Weapons Instructor course because we're just unfortunately not as cheesy or as cool, depends which side of the coin you're on. And so I was very lucky that I was selected to go on that course back in 2013. And we're on a big mission there. There's a big mission out in Nevada called Red Flag. Now, Red Flag is a huge multinational, what we call Tier 1, which is, you could appreciate Tier 1 would be high-end mission. And it's one of those that junior pilots can't go on. So you've normally a seasoned fighter pilot already is the minimum entry that a squadron can let you go and represent them on this exercise. And the whole history behind this exercise is the fact that from World War II through the Korean, Vietnam, and the Falklands, and all these conflicts that happened over time, that it's been proven that the majority of fighter pilots were shot down in their first 10 missions. And so this, but if you survive your first 10 missions, your chances of surviving the whole conflict go up exponentially. And so the Americans designed a Tier 1 exercise in Nevada. So it's just north of Vegas, which is wild. The base is actually in Vegas itself. And you go up against, another 120, 130 jets with, it's normally the Americans, us, the Australians, the Canadians, the real kind of the inner circle, if you like. And you are tested to a point that it represents, or it should represent as close to, without actually being shot down, your first 10 combat missions. It's a huge, huge, huge one. And anyway, we were out doing stuff. We were also on the qualified weapons course, so the pressure was high. We were seen to be the best on our squadrons at the time. We were trying to pass what was already a very difficult course, and we're doing that in the eyes of front of the Americans and all our closest counterparts on as difficult an operation you go. And me and a good friend of mine, I'll leave names out of it, where he was my wingman on the day, and we had managed to sneak through the enemy, in inverted commas, that were trying to get us, which were there's squadrons out there of fighter jets where their jobs are to replicate adversary tactics. So when we go up and fight, they're actually up there, but they operate as the adversaries would do, as opposed to how maybe a British or an American fighter jet would do. So we don't know how that's going to be. We just go up and react to the picture, as I mentioned, and do our job. But me and my wingman managed to sneak through a little gap unseen, and we were running in on the target. And on the way into the target, we saw one of these adversary jets kind of arcing in the sky in front of us without any idea at all that we were there. And so we kind of both rolled in to have a bit of a dogfight with him, but hopefully in, quick shot, get out before he saw we were there. And the way in which we normally do business is the wingman avoids the flight lead. But we both saw this jet at the same time. We both clearly got a bit excited. We got a thing called target fixated, which is a saying in our world where the big picture becomes very narrow, and that becomes very dangerous. And that's what happened. We both got target fixated, but the breakdown in communication there was who was going to actually go in and take the shot on this fighter aircraft we saw. And me and this other chap, we both went in at the same time. And it was only with about a second to go, we realized actually we were coming at different angles and we were pointing at each other. But it was too late to do anything. And I remember just the problem with being on the perfect collision. If you ever go to a roundabout in a car, start playing this game. If you see another car coming from another road heading to the same roundabout as you, if they're still in your window, you're on the perfect collision. If they're moving back, obviously you're going to move in front of it. And if they're moving towards you, you're going to pass behind it. But if they're still in your window, you're on the perfect collision. And the problem with being still, especially at high speed, is that your eye doesn't pick up on the movement because it's still, you notice the leaves outside because they're blowing on the branches out there. But things that are still, your eye doesn't pick up on. Yeah. And so this other chap was still as I was for him. And it was only at the last minute do we see each other. And I just remember bracing for impact. How we missed each other, don't know. Anyway, it turns out that we missed each other by, I think it was about 100 feet. What's 100 feet? 30 meters. It's nothing really. With a closing angle of about, I think it was probably just over 1,800 miles an hour. So, I mean, there would be nothing left of either of us. And we missed each other by meters, which shook us both up, clearly. We kind of, at that point, you kind of say, hey, look, it's just practice. Look, knock it off. Let's come back. Let's go back and land. Let's talk about it. And that's what we did. And the next big thing I was going to talk about, and I'm sure we're coming up to, is the debrief and how you learn. But yeah, that was the closest it came, really. I'm not going to get too graphic about what they would have found, but there wouldn't be much left of us.
There's quite a lot to unpick there. I mean, first of all, I suppose I want to ask, and maybe this is connected to the debrief. Maybe let's discuss that now, because you've got to get back into a cockpit and you've got to fly again, and yet, the moments before you're bracing yourself and thinking this is the end. So, I mean, mentally, how do you prepare yourself for that? How do you step back in, and what's the training for that? Or I suppose more importantly, what's the debrief that takes you through that journey and brings you out the other side?
Yeah, there's a real connection here that I'd be fascinated in it with your world as well, with people who are performing on stage. Yeah, because people talk about, and the answer to this behind it really is, if we boil it down, maybe ego. And it's really interesting because ego is a negative word, I think, in today's. People think, oh, he's got an ego. It's used as a negative word, but I think in the right place, used in the right moment, then it has to be a good thing. What is it that gets people out on stage? What is it that makes something successful? What is it that makes people realize that they want to be leaders? And when you line up on a runway in a fighter jet, what is it that truly makes you think you're going to come back? Because it is an abnormal testing environment, which is dynamic and dangerous. And if you genuinely don't think in 2 hours time you're going to be landing that aircraft back on that runway, how would your brain let you do it? And so it's a real interesting thing about that. So I kind of have, and obviously then it needs to be kept in check, or you need a little bit of it, because I'm sure maybe you've seen an actor say, I can't do it, and you just want them to have a bit more about like, no, come on, you can. You've got to believe in yourself here, and so that is it. And when you're operating at that level, when you're already at a tier 1 exercise, operating on a qualified weapons instructor course, it's huge. There's some level of ability there already, which you have to fall back on. Just like maybe you have one bad performance in your world, you go, right, well, that was yesterday, we've got to be good today. And I know that the stakes are different, but are they? I don't know. The stakes are only different if you perceive them to be different. And yes, fair enough, you might have a bad show, and
well, I was going to say you can die on stage. You can die on stage, but
but
not literally.
Yeah, true.
So it's a little bit different. But I mean, I don't know. Is the word? I mean, ego. You're right. Yeah, there is that idea. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo has an ego. There's no doubt. But there's also it's self-belief, isn't it? It's self-belief. It's confidence. It's absolutely aware of your ability and confident in your own abilities, and being able to step onto that stage, whatever that stage might be, 100%. And know that you can deliver to the at the top of your
100%.
game.
And know that you've done it before,
Mm-hmm.
and believe you'll do it again.
Yeah.
And it's there's so much into this. There's, you know, we talked about compartmentalization. Yeah, that's just happened in that moment. Now, where do you have the strength of mind, or you have strength of character to go, right, that's that done. Right, let's just hold on to that. Let's snapshot that, move on, because I'm not dead now. And he's, you know, albeit we were only a couple hundred feet from each other at high speeds, he's now 2 miles away with the speeds we're traveling. So there we go. That's fine. So that event is over. It's shocking, it's startling, it's upsetting, but it's over. How do you recover from it? And we used to talk about, not only as a world-class team, one that never makes any errors. Well, that's actually impossible, but it's how do you either smooth that error out? How do you make that error unnoticeable outside of what you're trying to do? But more importantly, how do you recover from that error? And the mark of a world-class performance for me at times is how quickly you recover from when things go wrong. And it's backing yourself with that. Now, obviously, we would go back, we would land, we'd talk about it, say, why? Like, well, what just happened? Well, we both nearly killed each other. Why? Well, because we're both going to this target, and as target fixated. Okay, but mate, we're good enough. What, you know, why did that happen? Break it all down. Right. How are we never going to let that happen again? And so that they're the three principles of a debrief. Now there's levels, and you know, there's 5 minutes, or there's 5 hours that you want to go into that, you know, of the myriad things. But depending on how much time you have, it's like, how are you and I never going to find ourselves in that position again? Okay, so we've broken it down. We understand it. We've now put in these principles. Okay, cool. Get back in the saddle, as they say. Let's go again. And the longer you're away from doing it because an event has turned you off from doing it or scared you away from doing it, the harder it is to come back to it. So we had a real thing of, you know, if as long as you're mentally prepared, as long as you're safe, because primarily in flying is all about being as safe as you can be at any point, because it is inherently a dangerous thing to be doing. You know, you are not on the ground in a bit of metal with thousands of moving parts going over it. Now, that's not to scare anyone about flying. I love it. It's the safest thing you can do. But if you break it down, it's not the safest thing, really, is it? It's not sitting on a park bench. So, you know, how are we going to make something that is inherently dangerous as safe as we can? That's the number one thing in aviation every time a pilot goes to work. So you genuinely, I hand on heart can tell you, I've never once lined up on a runway and applied the power of the engines and thought, there's a chance I'm not coming home. Not once.
So I'm going to break with tradition and split this episode into 2 parts, as I'm enjoying this incredible glimpse into the mindset, language and leadership of one of the most elite teams on the planet. So pop back next time to hear the second part of my conversation with Red Arrow's pilot, Daniel Lowes.